Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. The hour of 6:30 PM having arrived, I will call to order this regular meeting of the Joint Planning Board and Planning Licenses and Development Committee. Anyone wishing to view a copy of the agenda and supporting materials will find it on the city website. If you are in our audience tonight, you may access the agenda from any mobile device. Copies of the printed agenda are available in the wall pockets just as you entered the room. To receive electronic copies of future agenda packets, please go to the homepage and subscribe to the city meetings email list. The public and other board members will be recognized to ask questions and make comments on the agenda item under discussion. After being recognized, all remarks are to be made through the chair. Anyone who wishes to address the committee is asked to go to one of the microphones in the room and identify themselves by name and address prior to speaking. Will staff please conduct the roll?
For the Planning Board, Harold Farrington,
Present?
David Orgaz,
Here.
Mayor George Hansel,
Here.
Councilor Mike Remy, Emily Levine Bernier, Ryan Clancy,
Here.
Roberta Mastro Giovanni, Armando Rangel,
Here.
and for the alternates, Gail Summers, Randon Markelon, Tammy Adams, and Kenneth Cost. For PLD, Kate Bosley,
Here.
Mike Giacomo,
Here.
Phil Jones,
Here.
Gladys Johnson, and Raleigh Omerad.
Here. Thank you. Now we move to the minutes of our previous meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the April 10, 2023 meeting?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments, or changes to the minutes? Seeing none, let's move to a vote. All those in favor of the minutes? All opposed? Minutes are approved. The next item on the agenda is a public workshop for ordinance -0-2023-12 relating to zone change. Petitioner and owner Monadnock Habitat for Humanity, Inc. proposes to amend the zoning map of the city of Keene by changing the zoning designation of the property located at 0 Old Walpole Road, TMP 503-005-000, from rural to low density. The total area of land that will be impacted by this request is 7.1 acres. At this time, I'd like to invite the staff to present on the proposal.
And Mr. Chair, I think it's typically we invite the applicant to present first, but I'm happy to do the presentation first. It's up to you.
Okay, sorry, I was just following the
I know that's my mistake for.
agenda. Okay,
Yep.
so why don't we stick to the normal order and have the applicant go first? So may I invite the applicant to present? Should have picked up on that.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Michael Conway. I'm a volunteer with the Monadnock Habitat for Humanity, and I was responsible for preparing the application. With me this evening is Matthew Keenan. He's the president of Monadnock Habitat for Humanity.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So we haven't done this before, so I'm not sure what you're looking for a presentation, but we can give you kind of a synopsis of what we're looking to do, if that's fair? Okay. So we do own the property on Old Walpole Road, and it was donated to us a few years ago for the purpose of building affordable workforce housing. It's a little bit too large to put a house on and have it be affordable for our clientele, so the only way it was feasible for us to accept the donation was if we could subdivide it and put some additional houses on there. And we've done a lot of research and learned a lot along the way, but part of that is this is the first step in going from rural to low density, which basically equates it to all of the properties around it and behind it that we abut, with one exception. And that would allow us to then go forward, develop and subdivide, which we haven't done yet because first things first. Part of that is that in order to have more lots there, we have to have city water and sewer, and that ends about 750 feet from the property. So we have done some basic budgetary work to figure out what that would cost us, and we're about to start a campaign to raise the funds for that, to extend that to the property so that we can have multiple homes in there. Our intention is to not maximize the property for the subdivision. If you're familiar with it, it's got some terrain issues and rocky issues, but we also, we have to raise money and build a house, raise money, build a house, so it's a multi-year plan for us to put up some homes there after we raise the money to get the water and sewer there. So, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you pretty well summarized it. If the panel has any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Oh, okay, thank you. So, yeah, at this time, do any members of the board or the planning board, the committee or the planning board have any questions for the applicant? Councilor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you for being here. But I just wanted to point out that I hope you understand that we as a committee have to look at the zone change, that everything is possible. We can't be project-specific.
Understood.
It gets more, when you go to the planning board, it gets more project-specific.
Sure.
Right now, we have to look at everything possible with that zone change.
Yeah. Well, our position on the zone change, the project aside, is that it is in keeping with the nature of the surrounding properties.
That's a good answer. Yeah. Those are the things we're looking for.
We also believe, as we stated in the application, that it is in accordance and not in conflict with the master plan. We also,
And that's another good thing to point out.
yeah, we also believe that regardless of our project, that affordable housing is a huge issue for the city of Keene and just about everybody else. And this is one way to not solve that problem, certainly.
Okay, that's the point we can't be specific about.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, that's more project-specific, yeah. And I'm just saying that because I read some of the letters that came in from various people, and they were more project-specific, and I just wanted you to make sure you understood the board has to look at everything allowable, every use allowable under that zone change. They can't just look at what you want to do.
Right. I do understand that.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. So I just had a couple of quick questions. I know we're just getting started tonight. Do you guys have an idea of the cost associated with your preliminary figures for the extension of the water sewer lines?
In general terms, yeah, we have to have a plan for it to be actual,
To get an
Contractors to
actual
quote
quote
on it?
or a bid, yeah.
Okay.
so in order, we don't have a lot of specifics to address the other question now.
We have a very rough budgetary figure of $600,000.
And have you worked with the Community Development Department on what, from a site perspective, if LD1 as a zoning change, was that discussed? Because LD1, which is a version of the low-density zone, does not require sewer. It does
Yes,
not require water. It does require city sewer?
Yes.
So that might mitigate some of the,
The sewer, which is required to be either one of those two, is actually the bigger issue because it terminates further away. We have also been advised to look at the possibility, it would require acquiring an easement, but of tying into the sewer on Butternut Lane.
okay. And have you had any conversations with the city about their plans for expansion of those lines, if there was anything in the future that the city was considering doing prior to your application that might benefit you?
We weren't able to, I did have some conversations with the city engineer. And although there was some reference to possibility, there was no indication of a surety.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Now it's time to invite staff for comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mary Brenner, Senior Planner. So I'm just going to briefly go through the staff report and then answer any questions. So as Councilor Jones has already mentioned, in rezoning decisions, the petitioner's intended use of the property should not be considered, but rather all of the permitted uses that could occur should be considered for their suitability for this site. So just wanted to mention that at the beginning. This ordinance is proposing to amend the official zoning map of the city of Keene by changing the zoning of one specific parcel from rural to low density. The total land area that would be impacted is 7.1 acres. This particular parcel is located on Old Walpole Road. It's northwest of the roundabout with Maple Avenue, and I think it's West Surrey Road and Court Street. So it's that roundabout there. It's less than a mile, but more than half a mile northwest of that. And it is surrounded by the rural district on 3 sides, including across the road, but the rear of the lot abuts an area of low density. It's the Butternut Drive area, and so it would be continuous with a portion of the low density district. In terms of consistency with the master plan, and looking at the community vision, the master plan has 6 vision focus areas, and the focus area that's probably most relevant to this application is focus area 1, which is a quality built environment. Under this vision focus area, the community stated that they would like, or that achieving a quality built environment includes providing quality housing and balancing growth and the provision of infrastructure. That's one statement among several others. So this area of the city is close to city water and sewer. The city sewer is a little bit further away, so it would require extension of both of those lines. However, it's definitely feasible to connect to both city sewer and water. And this proposed zoning change would also provide the opportunity for more housing, in that it would increase the density that would be allowed on the lot. So currently, under the minimum lot size for the rural district, you could get a maximum of 3 units. Under low density, it would be somewhere more in the realm of, if you did a conservation residential development and you were able to work around all of the site constraints, you could potentially get as many as 30 units. That's not including site constraints, so that number is most likely an overestimate, but just to give you an idea of scale. With respect to the future land use plan in the master plan includes, identifies areas that are suitable for future growth and areas where growth should be constrained. This parcel is right on the edge of 2 of those areas, so it has, it's on the edge of what's called a conservation residential development / rural / low density residential / agriculture area, which is for shorthand is just called a CRD area in the future land use map. and what's called a secondary growth area / a low to medium density residential area. So the future land use and policy section notes that the CRD category includes areas for continued preservation of open space, agriculture, and rural residential uses, and also states that this zone would, or this area would be appropriate for the conservation residential development type of subdivision. And then the secondary growth areas identified as consisting of single-family and low to medium density development. So this parcel, again, is right on the edge of the two areas. The future land use map isn't very specific, so you can't hone in and see exactly where each individual parcel falls. So it's not, but it looks like it's right on the edge of those two zones. So the proposed zoning change would allow for a single-family development, or if the land is developed as a conservation residential development subdivision, in the low-density district, it could be developed as single-family, two-family, or small multifamily with up to 6 units in each building, or on each lot. And then the final portion of the master plan is the housing chapter. And the application, and I think that the applicant did a really good job of addressing this in the application that was submitted. And so in the application narrative, the applicant states the purpose of this proposal is to create an opportunity for the development of affordable workforce housing. The comprehensive master plan identifies housing as a fundamental challenge for the community as costs of community services continue to increase, and Keens' reliance on property taxes places a growing financial burden on its residents and businesses. And the housing chapter discusses the importance of providing a balanced and diverse housing stock, and notes that the greatest opportunity for new housing development is in developed areas. So this proposal would provide for the potential for a higher density of housing development in an area that is on the edge of existing development that is of a low to medium intensity, and also on the edge of where city water and sewer service could be provided. Just a quick overview of the two zoning districts. The current zoning is rural, which is a district that is intended to provide for areas of very low density development, predominantly of a residential or agricultural nature. Generally, the properties in the rural district are beyond the valley floor, where city water and sewer service are not readily available. The low density district is intended to provide for low-intensity, single-family residential development, and all uses in the low-density district shall have city water and sewer service. That's one of the implications of this zoning change. If it goes from rural to low-density, any development that occurs on that site will be required to have both city water and city sewer service. With respect to the district uses for those two zoning districts, the proposed change to go from rural to low density would significantly decrease the number of permitted uses that are allowed on the site. I don't believe there are any uses that are allowed in low density that aren't allowed in the rural district. However, there are many that are allowed in the rural district that aren't allowed in low density. So, for example, manufactured housing dwellings, a manufactured housing park, agricultural related education and recreational activity as a business, animal care facility, bed and breakfast, event venue, greenhouse / nursery, kennel, recreation / entertainment facility for the outdoors, a cemetery, farming, golf course, gravel pit, solar energy systems, including small scale, medium scale, and large scale, are all allowed in the rural district, but not allowed in low density. So all of those uses will be no longer allowed on this property if this proposal is approved. The dimensional requirements are fairly similar. The main difference is going to be in the minimum lot size that's allowed. In the rural district, currently it's 2 acres, whereas in the low density district, it's 10,000 square feet. So it's a pretty significant change to the minimum lot size that would be allowed. The rural district also has larger setback requirements. And it's more restrictive in terms of the maximum building coverage and maximum impervious coverage that's permitted on a lot. However, the required road frontage in the low-density district is actually slightly higher than in the rural district. I think, and I did include, if you're interested, on page 22 of the packet, there's a table that compares the different dimensional requirements for the two districts. And then as far as the implications of the proposed change, there's really two major ones that staff identified. The first one, again, is the potential density of development. Under the current zoning, again, the maximum number of dwelling units would be 3. Because the parcel is less than 10 acres in size, this parcel would not be eligible for a CRD subdivision under the current zoning. If it is rezoned to low density, it would, because it's more than 5 acres in size, it could be developed as a CRD subdivision within the low density district, which means that they could get significant density out of the parcel if it were developed in that way. Just doing the calculation to do the maximum number of dwelling units that would be allowed would be 30. Now, whether or not they could actually get that many units would depend on site constraints, steep slopes, the area taken up by the road, things like that. If they were willing to do small multifamily buildings versus single-family homes, that would all play into that number. If they were to develop the property just doing front lots where their frontage is on Old Walpole Road, because of the frontage requirement in the low-density district, the maximum number of units under that scenario would be 13. So it kind of gives you a range of somewhere between 13 to 30 would be the potential for development. With respect to the provision of city water and sewer service, the zoning regulations state that all uses in the low-density district shall have city water and sewer service. Therefore, the property owner would be required to extend city water and sewer to the site at their own expense prior to any developments. I did reach out to city engineering staff, and they assured me that there's definitely sufficient volume and pressure available to connect to city water. However, the public main would need to be extended, and then depending on the nature of the development, they may be required to provide one or more hydrants. So kind of, again, it depends on what the intensity of development is, if it's developed as a CRD subdivision or not. And then, in addition, while there is sufficient capacity available in the existing sewer main on Old Walpole Road, it is located a little further away. It's at the intersection of Hilltop Drive, and so the developer would need to install a pump in order to reach that. However, the applicant did note that they are seeking options to try and connect the sewer service on Butternut Drive, which is much closer. The constraint there is that they would need to secure an easement to get that sewer line to run across private property. So that isn't a guarantee. And I believe that's all I have, but if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Councilor Bosley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just 2 quick questions. They're going to sound repetitive a little bit. The applicant came in with an application for low density, but why didn't LD1 get discussed? I feel like it's a much less restrictive option for them. And would there have been any implications to CRD for LD1 versus LD?
So staff did bring up the option of LD1, and I think the applicant actually, they created a whole chart. I remember they showed it to us where they kind of discussed the pros and cons of sticking with rural or going with LD1 or LD and what the different options would be for each zoning district. So I know that they definitely considered it. It's been a couple months now, but I think some of the factors that they discussed were that, connecting to city water is actually not a big barrier for them. The barrier really is the sewer connection, and the sewer connection is required regardless of if it's LD1 or LD. I know LD1, you could also do a CRD subdivision because the minimum lot size for that is 5 acres. But the minimum lot size for LD1 is an acre. So
that does affect.
So if they're not planning to do a CRD subdivision, that would limit the number of houses to 7. And then with, and that's just doing front lots with frontage on Old Walpole Road, whereas with LD, they could get more like somewhere between 10 and 13. So I think those were the factors that went into their decision.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's helpful. And I feel like I might be stealing Counselor Jones's comment. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I feel like I've heard you say this before. I'm a little concerned about lot number 4 getting isolated with this zoning change. Was there a reason why we wouldn't extend that zoning change through lot number 4?
Yep, so you're referring to the lot that would kind of become a little peninsula of rural on its own.
Mhm.
So that parcel, the applicant did reach out to the owner of that parcel. That was something that staff had recommended as well. And the owner of that parcel was not interested in being rezoned. The owner seemed supportive of this application in general, but wanted to stay in the rural district for his particular property.
Okay.
He said that he had no plans to subdivide and just, he was happy with the way things were.
And it would restrict some uses on his property, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions? Counselor Jones?
Thank you. I just want to follow up a little bit on Kate. See, I can do this here too.
That's okay. We've been doing
My
this a
Mic is
while.
off, I'm sorry. On page 22, the dimensional requirements, I think you just answered the question, because you mentioned LD1 in there, I don't know if that's a typo. And then you also talk about these 3 districts. Are you talking about rural LD
Yeah.
density and low density 1, or you talking about CRD in there as a third one, or?
So I apologize, this, that's an error, it should say 2 districts. The only 2 districts that
Okay,
are under discussion are the current district that's rural and the proposed that's low density. Yep, so that's an error.
okay,
Sorry
that
about
threw me off a little bit, I'm sorry.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mary. Okay, so I would just like to remind the public that this is not a formal public hearing, it's a public workshop. But at this time, I would like to invite members of the public to offer comments or questions on the proposed ordinance. So, please come forward and to the microphone, or you can sit and state your name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Todd Palmer. I live at and own 142 Old Walpole Road, the Lot 4.
Welcome.
Thank you. As far as changing the zoning, I gain nothing by it. The way things are is perfectly fine by me. So there's no intention, no desire to develop or anything like that. The way the property is fine by me. I had some questions and concerns. At the present time, Mr. Conway and Mr. Keenan have addressed those. So, at this point, I don't have anything. I will say that, you know, I would look forward to having Habitat as neighbors. So, I thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. First of all, I want to apologize. My hearing is about as poor as it possibly can. I could not hear the 2 gentlemen speaking, and I didn't get much of this, so I apologize if I may make some comments that have already been addressed and so forth. My name is Jim Craig, and I'm an abutter across the street from where the zoning change is being asked to be made. I have 33 acres of land there. It's all in rural. I've owned that land for 47 years, and I've tried to do my best to keep that as good as I possibly can as rural landscape. Been enjoyed by many, many people, and hopefully when my lights go out or when someone else buys the land, they'll continue to maintain it the way that I have. I do have a concern with the zoning requests. As we all know, that recently the rural was changed from 5 acres to 2 acres. And that would mean that these people that have owned this land, rather than just being able to put up one habitat dwelling, they can now put up as many as 3 under the existing conditions. Going any further than that into changing the zone would require, I know, water and sewage. And I guess that triggers something in my mind, because being abutting that area, you put water and sewage in there. I also have 700 and some odd feet along the old Walpole Road in front of there. So would it mean then that I'm opening up a can of worms by saying, hey, you're going to do that on one side of the street? I'm going to go and have you do it on the other side of the street before I cash out. And I don't think that's the best interest of what Keene is trying to do. The other major concern that I have, there's a lot of wildlife in that area. And I don't know if any of you had the opportunity to go out with your umbrellas and take a look at this particular piece of property here. As we know, as you all probably know, it slopes down. On the other side, my land slopes up, but the water goes down. And believe me, it pours and it dumps into this area. There are 3 or 4 drains that dump into this area. You can see it as streams. So it's really important to keep that as a wooded area as much as possible, because it's just going to cause all kinds of havoc where this water is going to flow. I know for a fact my driveway is right there. It's been washed out 3 times in the last week and so forth, but it goes down into this area here. So I think if you change this, then where does it stop? Can I have the right to do the same thing across the street, or someone else that may buy my property? So I think the committee has done a good job changing from 5 acres to 2, but I think that's where it should stop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Dave Bergeron, and I live at 139 Old Walpole Road, which is across the street, kind of diagonally from this property. I guess I'd like to say that I think I've volunteered for Habitat in the past. I enjoy the work they do. I love the work they do. But not looking at them, but looking at what happens for rezoning the property, changing it from, you know, the allowance of being 3 lots there to up to 30 lots there. I have a problem with that, and I have a problem with it for a couple of reasons. The first being is that if you actually look at the map that's on your page 2 in your packet, the property is not surrounded by low density, it's surrounded by rural. It does have some low density to the rear, but 3 other sides are surrounded by by rural. Those rural lots are the one that Mr. Palmer owns is about 2.2 acres. The one on the other side is 2.1. Then there's Mr. Craig's land, which is 33, and then there's my lot, which is 2 acres. So they're all in basically the size of what's allowed in the rural zone. So I take exception by saying that changing it to a low density is going to be in character with the neighborhood. I disagree with it. I think the character of the neighborhood is rural, being that all of the properties in that area are 2 acres or larger. So I think that it being rural, it's more in the character of the rural zone. I guess my concern is also is that Habitat for Humanity doesn't know yet whether they can do what they want to do. And I understand that there's gotta be fundraising done to determine whether they can get the money to extend the sewer and water. But what happens if they don't? What if they can't get the funding to do that? What if they can't get the easement to go down to Butternut Drive? And then the property gets sold and it's already zone low density. Whoever buys it is gonna do whatever they can to put the most lots in it, the most houses on it that they can, and it's gonna be their right because it'll be zone low density. So, you know, I look at it as, much like Councilor Jones said, that you're not looking at the use that they wanna do, but what happens when it gets rezoned. And what happens when it gets rezoned is it's available for anybody to purchase that property and build on it what they think they can get. And, I mean, that's my concern. The character of the neighborhood, as I said, is 2-acre lots, going to low density, which is 4 lots per acre, is not in keeping with the character of the area, and it could be a detriment to other properties in the area. You know, I think that if Habitat wanted to do the rural, they could get easily, they can do the 3 lots, they could probably get 4 with a variance. And, you know, that's a good number. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments?
My name's Nick, 178 Walpole Road, 2.1 acres right up the road from it. Disregarding who is applying and what their intended use is, going from 3 units to, you know, potentially 30 is ridiculous. It's a lot of units for that small piece of land. It's surrounded by, everybody has 2 acres or more. The wildlife, somebody mentioned, we have rabbits running through our yard every day, woodpeckers, deer. I think that would disrupt a lot of it. The traffic and noise pollution, we already have people blowing down the road at 70 miles an hour, so I don't think that would improve the situation. Yeah, that's it. But those are my main concerns: noise pollution, wildlife, and I mean that's a lot of units for 7 acres. So.
Thank you.
Hi. Ooh, gosh. Sorry. Laura Tobin, I live on Center Street. I've heard a lot of people's concerns, and I think a lot of them are very valid. And I guess I would also point out that, so with not changing it to a low density would mean that it could be used for, when Mary listed the list of uses, that seemed like a lot of different ways that were not residential, which I think is kind of what I've heard a lot of people expressing concern about: too many houses in one place, but not so much if someone built a school there or a handful of the other uses that would be allowed in a rural area. I think the other part of it that I keep thinking is that while I can appreciate the concerns about having a lot of properties on, or a lot of houses close together, that kind of allows more preservation of the area around it. So let's say that you bought this property and you were able to build 4 houses on it. That would mean that in a few years you're going to need to build 4 more. You're going to need to buy another property, and so that area would keep expanding of, a house every 100 feet, rather than having a cluster of houses together where they can then enjoy the environment around it. The other thing I would say is that I believe I remember a section in the master plan that talked about the development of neighborhoods, which is essentially what, not just this project, but anytime you kind of say you allow an area to have houses close together, that kind of is the development of a neighborhood rather than just having sporadic houses where people are speeding past. I think people actually do tend to go a lot slower in neighborhoods. So just thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jessica. I own the property at 108 Butternut Drive, so literally across the pond, as the other gentleman was saying. I've been there since about 2007. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed the property. I've enjoyed the wood line. I've enjoyed the privacy. So, of course, I'm very concerned about this ordinance, this meeting here. One, because of the city sewer on Butternut Drive. As you all know, Maple Acres is a problem area for sewage. It's always been. People are changing their sewer lines all the time. They fail very easily. So what is this impact for our neighborhood, Maple Acres? We'd like to know a little bit more about that. And I think I speak for myself, but also my fellow Butternut people that are here today as well. And do you have any?
Mr. Chairman, I'm Gail Pratt. I also reside at 108 Butternut Drive, right at the bottom of the proposed, or the site that is proposed to be rezoned. And my main concern would be, right now, if you go out there right now, it's a pond. If this is developed, obviously the absorption factor is going down and the water's gonna go somewhere. We're at the bottom of the hill. What's that gonna mean? I have not heard of a study or anything, what that's gonna mean for all of the people on Butternut Drive. A lot of them right now, if you go out through there, on a sunny day, you'll see their driveways are flooded from their sump pumps being pumped out now. If there's more water there, what's gonna be the result of that?
And I will say that I was approached by Habitat for Humanity last year because they did want an easement across my property. And in taking consideration of not only my property, my parcel, but all of the butternut on my end, I declined.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Nick Bergman and I reside at 122 Butternut Drive. My property is right below where this proposed project is going. And a lot of people have mentioned the water that's back there. Currently, we don't have water in our basement as it sits. It's been like that for years. A lot of places in the area do. And I know this week is kind of an exception. I'm sure everybody's saying, well, water, water, water this week. But, you know, it is a concern because it does run through there, the back of my property. I would say probably 20 to 30 feet of my property. And then probably 40 feet beyond that is all ferns and like wetland type vegetation. That also then runs up that, as we're looking at the map, kind of the bottom portion of it. That like bottom, I don't know where the camera is, but this bottom portion here, all the way up through, and then there is almost like a number of streams that come through down here. There's also, I don't know, my daughter was saying that, you know, there's a bear that lives back there in the caves. And I don't know, I've never seen the bear in the cave, but, you know, there is wildlife that's back there. Changing the zoning of the property to light residential, I have a big concern about that because there's a potential for a lot of roof lines, roadways, driveways, sheds, you know, whatever they end up wanting to do with the property that's gonna shed water. And like our other neighbor said, you know, has there been a study about what's going on with the, like water drainage system in our area? Will that be able to handle anything that, you know, is covered? As far as the water goes. The wildlife, yeah, there's rabbits, they've come through, there's deer, I'm sure they would find another spot, but, I think that, you know, as of right now, we like living in Keene. We've had neighbors come to, or friends come to Keene, come to our backyard, and they're like, you know, we wouldn't think that we were in Keene, because yes, it's a neighborhood driving through, and then we get to your house, and, you know, you're outside and you have the woods behind you, and we really enjoy that. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Steve Rennick, and I live at 26 Butternut Drive, which is down from the loop on Butternut Drive. And the problem we're gonna have on Butternut Drive, if this goes in, is the drains can't handle, the storm drains right now can't handle the water down by 26, which is off of Apollo. Off of Apollo and Autumn Hill. I have 3 drains. There's a drain at the end of my driveway, a drain in front of the house next to me, and a drain across the street from her. And when it rains like it did last night, the drains can't handle the water. So in the 28 years I've lived in my house, I've replaced my entire basement 3 times at my cost. All the sewer drains and all the other drains have been repaired in our area up until the corner of Kennedy Drive and Liberty. Nothing has been repaired on Autumn Hill, the back loop of Liberty, or from Apollo through the whole loop of Butternut Drive. So by adding all of these other parcels, houses, there's no way the drains right now are gonna be handling it. We've been in touch with the engineers to see when they're gonna fit. We have, like, I've replaced, last year, it cost me $30,000 to replace the drains under my house and from the foundation of my house out to the street, because they just keep collapsing. So all of the drains on Butternut Drive are collapsing. So if you add more houses, whether it be 1, 3, or 13, it's never gonna handle all of that. And it's gonna cost more, most likely, everyone at this end of the loop is gonna be paying a fortune for repairs on their houses, and the insurance doesn't cover it, unless you have special insurance. And I learned that the hard way. So by adding all of these, I think it's a great idea, Habitat for Humanity, but Butternut Drive cannot handle any more water. And you're gonna create a huge, huge nightmare out there for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to speak?
Todd Palmer, 142 Old Walpole Road. I just wanted to amend my remarks that my learned neighbors, Mr. Craig and Mr. Bergeron, have certainly researched this matter better than I have, and I support their concerns. I feel bad for my neighbors on Old Walpole and the Butternut area.
Thank you. Okay. I'd also like to note that 4 letters were received by the planning department in support of this application. The letters were from the Richards Group, Cheshire Medical Center, the Insurance Source, and the Monadnock Interfaith Project. Copies of these letters were sent to the committee members by email, and printed copies are on the desk in front of each committee member. Okay, last call for public comment. With that, I close the public workshop, and we move to deliberation. Any questions or comments, or? Councilor Bosley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is for staff. Can you just remind me, with a CRD in rural, how many lots were we talking about if there was a conservation development placed in a rural zone? 13?
So a conservation residential development subdivision wouldn't be allowed under the current zoning because the minimum lot size is 10 acres.
Okay.
The applicant, I suppose, could request a variance, but they would still be restricted to a maximum of 3 units. So all that would do for them is mean that they could cluster those units closer together.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Hansel?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify for the attendees and members of the public that tonight we're really just looking at the zoning, and I totally hear the concerns about potential flooding and creating runoff and all of that, but that would have to be reviewed as part of a site plan review process for just the planning board. And so tonight, really, the action for this committee is for the planning board to assess the zoning change request against the current master plan that was done in 2010, and then for the Planning Licenses and Development Committee to recommend a public hearing where you would all have another chance to address your concerns in front of the full city council.
Thank you. Councilor Giacomo?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, you guys have been really good at sniping all my questions. You may have missed Phil's, but you got mine. But no, I think I came into this after reading the whole summary on it, saying, absolutely, this is a no-brainer. It has been difficult to separate the application with the actual, the pure and simple zoning change here. The way that I do have to look at this, though, is that, again, all the uses that are allowable now, all the uses that would be allowable are already allowable now. The only difference would be a density. So if someone wanted to subdivide this, they already could have done that. They already could have built houses on it. I do share a serious concern about all the drainage and stuff. I'm looking at the topo maps on my phone while you guys are talking and mentioning all the properties, and I see, yeah, if there was more intense development on there, I could see that being a major issue with the lack of permeable ground cover. That is not necessarily specific to this application, just anything that is a higher density application wouldn't result in generally less permeable ground cover. So I do worry about it, but at the same time, our recommendation would be whether to send it or whether to not send it to a broader public hearing. And I think certainly I think there needs to be, I would invite this to be heard by a larger group. So I'd certainly support that. That being said, if it did have specific applications, those would have their own reviews, and they might not get approved. So we have to make sure the applicant understands that for sure.
Thank you. Councilor Jones?
Thank you. Well, I agree with Councilor Giacomo that it does need to go to, it does need to go move on to that broader public hearing. Our vote is strictly a formality, saying it should go before the city council. Even if all 4 of us voted no, the petitioner still has a right to be heard in front of the city council. So I'll be voting yes to do that and look forward to that hearing before the council.
Councilor Ormerod?
Thank you. I've
I understand that there are some executional difficulties that we've heard about tonight, but that's beyond the scope of what we can do. And I'm a little bit biased in favor of finding sites for more workforce development. This may not be the site, but I think we need a broader review, so I'm gonna support this.
Mayor Hansel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And from the planning board side, I mean, it's kind of a difficult determination to make because you can pick sentences out of the master plan that are supportive of this type of zoning change and ones that obviously would probably be sort of against it. I did try to pick out several and sort of almost weigh them by number. And that's one of the ways that I've tried to do it as a planning board member over the years. And my determination is that this would be supportive. The master plan would be supportive of this zoning change, but there's got to be a caveat to that to say it's not very clear. The master plan is at a high level intentionally, and so to get specific with it is challenging.
Thank you. Yeah, I would agree with you. I did the same exercise. And as you said, there's still a lot of snafus if this goes to a site plan application, because there's, obviously, we heard so tonight, some very significant issues with water. And I think, that would need to be addressed to the satisfaction of the abutters in a site plan. Okay, well, that's just my opinion now. I think we can move to, Councilor Giacomo.
Thank you, Chair. One thing I did want to mention, you and George made me think of it, is the one concern I really did have was that one parcel, the peninsular parcel that would occur there. And my concern kind of moved from that with the comments that we heard, is that if this was actually accessed off of Butternut, I might say it is more in line with but then again, you're looking into use again. But being off of Old Walpole Road is not a very residential road necessarily. It really has more of a rural character. If it was coming off of Butternut, coming off of Liberty, coming off of one of those roads, I'd say, oh yeah, it's definitely, that's a residential zone through and through. So that was my initial thought on that, and the people that spoke up tonight definitely confirmed some of that, and I looked closer at the map.
Thank you. Councilor Bosley, yes, please.
Thank you. And I would just like to let the public understand the process a little bit. We, the Planning, Licenses, and Development Committee this evening will be voting on whether to recommend that the mayor set this public hearing. As you've heard, that's a formality for us. However, I do encourage you all to come in support or against this at the public hearing. That's an opportunity for all 15 counselors to hear and weigh your concerns. And after that public hearing, the committee will deliberate without any public comment and make a recommendation back to full council. And ultimately, the council will decide whether the zoning change is appropriate.
Okay, I think at this time we're ready for the motions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On behalf of the planning board, I'd move to find the proposed ordinance O-2023-12 consistent with the 2010 comprehensive master plan.
May I have a second?
A second.
Any discussion from the planning board? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. So all those in favor of the motion? Any opposed? The motion is passed by the planning board for the PLD motion.
I would invite a motion.
Move to recommend this matter be referred to a, sorry, losing my mind tonight. Move to refer this matter to a public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Councilor Giacomo, second by Councilor Jones. Any questions on that? Seeing none, I would ask for a vote. All in favor? And that is unanimous.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, everyone, for your comments.
Do you want to run the slide projector? We can move it over to you if you prefer this.
No, I'll sit over here.
Okay.
Wherever you want. Control L to. So how do you control it? Just,
You should invite us.
how do you control it? The way they're doing the slides.
What you can do is you can move this up and down or just back and forth. See?
No.
Back and forth,
Okay.
up or down, either one, however your mind works.
Okay.
Okay, we are going to move on to the next item on our agenda. So I would appreciate it if you could take your conversations to the hallway, please. Thank you.
Well, good evening. Thanks for being here tonight. We're missing a few people, but I hope you take the information back to the rest of the planning board and planning board PLD members. Raleigh and I put a lot of time into this. I've attended 5 workshops. I'm about workshopped out, but this was a really good academy to attend to. So my name is Pam Russell Slack.
And I'm Raleigh Ormerod, and I also attended the workshops. We would drive to Concord, and we met with, I think there was 60 or 70 other people who went through this training as well. And we broke up into tables, and there was a lot of discussion amongst the different areas on all of these. So you're going to see some ideas that are vetted broadly across the whole state when we come to it.
We're hoping at some point we obtained a list of names and email addresses from other towns in the Monadnock region and a little bit outside of the Monadnock region. And we're hoping at some point to bring all of us to come back together so we can see what kind of ideas those towns are moving forward with as well. So that's one of the other steps we're planning on at some point. So I'll let you start with the
Sure.
first slide.
Sure, go ahead. So to give credit where credit is due, this was funded by the New Hampshire Housing Opportunity from a planning grant that I believe that the city put together for us and underwritten by the New Hampshire Finance Authority. And we also saw a lot of people from the New Hampshire Housing and the UNH Extension. So this seems like a massive coordination at the state level to move things forward and to educate the towns and communities of how to help solve the housing crises that we're seeing. And we participated from January through May, and there may be some supplemental visits in October, but we want to put a stake in the ground and share the learnings right now. Okay?
Yes, we're supposed to be doing some site visits. There were 2 different dates, but they'd been postponed because there were so many people that signed up for the Housing Academy that they postponed all of the visits throughout the state. And so we're hoping to do that back in the fall.
And I'm going to go through 4 sessions. And the session number 1 was, the focus was on community engagement. And questions were asked, and they gave us some ways to find out these answers, is do we have the right information? Does the community know and have the right information? And how can the community participate in workforce housing and other housing solutions? And how can they be sure that their voices are being heard when we're going to propose changes and find solutions to solve a crisis? If you've got a crisis and you've got a 0.5% vacancy rate and there's no end in sight, there's going to be, the feeling is there's got to be some interventions in order to improve the situation.
I just want to give one little brief definition here because a lot of people do not understand workforce housing. So I'll give you an example which was given to us, and it'll probably come up again on one of the slides, but I think this is very important for all of us to remember. For a family of 4 with an income of $80,000, they meet the requirements for workforce housing. I think a lot of people, when you say workforce housing, they're not thinking that it can go as high as $80,000. But a family of 4 that only makes $80,000 a year can qualify for workforce housing. That's very important to remember.
And we talk about what is the right type of information. One of the right types of information is what are the options and all the types of housing that we should consider, and do we have the right mix? There's mixed use, there's single family, multifamily, manufactured housing, co-housing, senior and age-restricted housing, and accessory dwelling units. So there's many different options, and we've taken some steps towards some of them, but we may have some more options as well too, particularly on the senior and age-restricted. And they couldn't stress enough how important it was to plan for good community engagement. And they said the education of the public of what the issues are and what the solutions are and what the very definitions are. Workforce housing, median income, 80,000. I think that information is not well known in our community, and it should be, and it has to be. And also participation of the public using some of these new tools, and I'll give some examples of some of these tools. And we also know that it's for influencing and education, the listening that we do and the action that we take to show that we're listening is pretty important. In another session, it was focusing on storytelling as a method of engagement. We do have a lot of engagement here, and we hear people's stories, not just reasons for and against, but I had Josh Meehan on my radio program here a few weeks ago. He's the executive director of Keene Housing, which you probably know. And a story he told us, one story was that there's a log jam, that there's workforce and market rate housing people who are paying market rate in Keene Housing because there's no place to live. They've kind of graduated up, they're done with their vouchers, and they're paying market rate, and they would gladly move out and free up some Keene Housing for other people, but there's no place for them to go. We've been talking about this ladder of moving up of income and size in houses, and Josh told us that that is a really true narrative. He also said that the housing vouchers waiting list is up to 7 years. So if we could free some of those, and this is a lot, I think he said like 40 families, that could move out if they had workforce housing, we could free up another 40 units at least for that. And again, median income of 80K and family of 4, they actually do qualify for these vouchers for workforce housing. The current parking requirements is in the downtown, he also said, is been an issue. The story he told is that if they didn't have to have 2 cars per unit, they could have less of the impermeable surface, and there could be really more solutions and more housing that's actually built instead of placing places to park the cars. So going against, what do we want to do? And we have some choices that we could make.
A good example of that is the new project that's being built on Upper Washington Street, the old Roosevelt School. He would be able to add more apartments if the parking requirements were different. So I think that's something maybe the council could look at.
And again, another storytelling, we had another key informant and community leader with Beth Daniels, of the CEO of Southwest Community Service, who's also a guest on with the radio show. Jesse and I co-hosted this and had a good time. We learned a lot and got people kind of interested in the topic. But the rent increases and the low importance apartment stock, it impacts everyone, she says, okay? And the reason say, she's heard too many times in her position, I've got a home. Why is the fact that other people don't or don't have adequate housing my problem? It's a difficult and an uncomfortable question, but one that I think we need to put to the community and give them some answers. And one of the answers is that we need workforce people to man and create the coffee shops, that work at the coffee shops, the nursing homes, the child care services, the home care services. We need diverse service workers in the city and close by in all of our neighborhoods. On the other side, with the home ownership, she told us that all income and ownership levels are impacted, and they actually do a lot of work on the owner side with heating system replacement, finding subsidies and finding money for that, and other ongoing operation expenses that you will have in workforce housing. So that is part of the issue. Electricity cost is a big one, and we've tried to adjust that as well too. But this is an issue that impacts the homeowners as well too.
I did notice on the housing assessment that some of the issues that were brought up when the counselors met, it's mostly senior citizens, and this is one of the areas that I work in at work. Housing is one of my biggest areas with the senator. And the fact is that many senior citizens are unable to pay for repairs for their homes. But I am here to tell you, there is money available to do that. It's just it's educating people to tell them where to find that money in order to replace the furnace, replace windows. Their homeowner's insurance has gone up because their roof needs to be replaced. The painting needs to be done. But I'm here to tell you that there is money available, and so I'm hoping to bring more of that information forward because I noticed that was on the housing assessment presentation that was just recently given to you as well.
The focus of another session, the third session, were key informant interviews. Those are one-on-ones with community leaders and people who have access to information and access to influence. And we had several key informants on the radio show. And there's a link for anyone to listen to that's in this presentation where you can hear the podcast of what these leaders said about options and severity of the Keene housing crisis. And for key informant interviews, they say that this is a place to start. It's not the end, right? But we start with them because they give us a lot of hypotheses and a lot of ideas. And we often get if we do a key informant interviews, if I'm doing it, I will hear opposing views. And so they give us some tools and some interpersonal communication tactics to have us listen to opposing views. And we're a public body and we hear them, but we're up here listening. On a key informant interview, it's back and forth. So need to be able to acknowledge and get the information in one-on-one interviews with people, even if we don't agree with what we're hearing. New Hampshire Listens was the consulting firm that came in and taught some of these very interesting techniques. And another thing on the key informant interviews is it's important, hang on just a second, I was going to talk about the data, okay?
All righty then.
Okay, the data is, you can look at updated data, but we were taught ways to use the updated data, and there we go. We can go where you wanted to. Just wanted to mention that there's actually data. It's not all just people's opinions and stories, but it's how they interpret the data and how they help us take action on it. And so then again, Jesse and I co-hosted, we had Josh Meehan from the Executive Director of Keene Housing, Beth Daniels, the CEO of Southwest Community Services, Tom Julius and Angela Pape were there talking, and Jack Franks, CEO of Avenue Development Group. So we weren't completely diverse, but we tried to get some stakeholders from other places.
I am on the Keene Housing Board as well. This is my 8th year. I don't know if that's good or bad, but anyway, it's, I've been dealing with housing issues for a very, very long time, and Keene does have an awesome Keene housing program. I don't know if you know a lot about it, but if you want to have a quick cup of coffee, Josh Meehan is definitely your man. He's probably one of the best housing directors in all of New England, and I would probably even go even further. He's really, really very good.
Thank you. So this is an example responding to opposing views that we see, and we have to remember that when anyone is up there and they're confronted with some uncomfortable information, we need to acknowledge that and realize that there's anxiety is one of the things that happens. In addition to that, there's a number of other things. Sometimes there's an imbalance in power. People don't think that they can talk to the city council. But there's a number of different, I think we had 12 or 14 different techniques that we got to role play on how to deal and how to talk about important things that may be uncomfortable, or we need to come to a more elegant solution than what individual people are thinking. And we also did a deep dive into what the referenced and updated data is. For example, the U.S. Census Bureau. It's every 10 years, and I think it came out in 2022. But our current master plan is referencing old census data as well for the local, okay? And I'm going to say more about this. Then there's the American Community Survey, which comes out every single year, and I think it's coming out in July this year. There's the New England, of course, the NARIN network, the MLS. There's the Warren Group, which actually provides the property deeds and mortgage data, because many of the transactions don't go through the MLS, but you do have the Warren Group, and all this data is available, I think still to us, through October at least, right?
Yes.
Through the grant. And then the New Hampshire Housing's annual residential rental cost survey, which is annual. And it looks at the median gross rent and the vacancy rates. And I believe that's being updated, and that's the new data is, I think, now available as well. So these are data that we should reference, and our old master plan didn't reference all this data. Okay. And each one, we dug in, like we said, that we did a deep dive. We had for instance, the annual residential cost survey. There are vacancy rates, and there's geographic areas. If you look on the right-hand side, that's kind of the denominator of the equation. Where you want to look by state, the county, regionals, and all the way down to market areas and towns and cities. There's a number of different ways to look at this data. That's why the annual rental cost survey is really good, and you can get that data, and we should look at that in our planning as well, since 40% of the new properties that we're going to need in the next 10 years are in the rental area. And then the geographics. I did mention those geographics, and for those of us like me that's having a hard time reading it, I just printed them out, like the HUD Metro Fair Market area, and got all the acronyms for us for reference. Okay? And on the fourth session, we focused together again, and we had 60 or 70 people broken up by groups who were listening to presentations, and we're talking to each other about some of the issues. And one of them is, okay, a lot of the community leaders that were here we're asking the same questions. How do we engage the whole community? How do we know who to talk to? How do we get people together? And they mentioned the key informant interviews, which is for hypothesis building. You don't go to some of your community leaders and, okay, we've got the answer, let's go forward, let's change the laws, let's do all that. No, that's not how we want to do things. And we haven't done things here, but they say that that's really a good first start. Need a broader audience, we need input from different stakeholder groups, because housing solutions look different to everyone. And we took a solution and we hired Camoin and we hired others and we tried to invite a lot of people to do it. But we learned about a new method that's kind of fun that might help us make sure that we got all the right stakeholder groups. Okay, and these are focus groups with small groups of people. Go ahead. And it's the flower. And I'm sorry I have to subject you to my handwriting because I was listening during this and I was writing down exactly what it was. But a flower is like, who are the constituent groups? You want to talk to a group of seniors, for example. You want to talk to some school alumni and people who have lived in the area for a while, founding families. Some of the builders groups, and then the young professionals who are trapped in their parents' basements, which we know are flooding these days. So so that's the idea of the flower diagram. It's to get together as a first step after we talk to some of the key leaders. And these were some of the ones that we came up with this is how 7 people at my table tried to solve Keane's housing. This was their stab at us, so go ahead.
Well, I think I'm just going to comment on this because I do fit in two of these groups, which there might be maybe 2 others on here, a couple others. I'm a senior, and I did note that in the housing assessment, when the counselors broke up again, you were talking about how many homes are available in Keene, and a lot of them are seniors, and a lot of them live alone. That's me. My children are grown. I live in my house by myself, but I'm going to tell you right now, I don't want a roommate. So don't call me. So this is why I think it's very important to bring seniors together, and if you want to do that, a great place to start is the Keene Senior Center. Great group of people there. They're not only from Keene. It's a wide group, and it might be something maybe that Raleigh and I could do to get their opinions on what they would like. Because I'm going to tell you, as a senior, I don't want anybody telling me what they want me to do, ever. So the other thing is I'm a 5th generation here and live in this area. I know this area. I know a lot of the seniors in this area, and I think it's very, very important that they be included in any kind of decision, or at least be allowed to, tell you what it is they want. I know one of the big issues, and we've already mentioned it in the slide, the fact that many of the seniors, can't afford to do the repairs in their homes, and they're costly. But I will tell you, it'd be much more costly if they end up in a nursing home. I will tell you that right now. Everything will be taken from them. It's a very, very difficult and sober experience. I've been there with a couple of families trying to help them. So the minute you brought up seniors in the housing assessment, and I did read through the housing assessment so I could get an idea of what the counselors were thinking about. I think this is a group because the majority of the voters in the city of Keene, over 50% of them are seniors. So this is a group we need to pay attention to. I'm part of the baby boomer generation. The baby boomer generation is not going to go away for at least another 10 years. We're going to be aging out, and most seniors would prefer to stay in their homes. Next slide.
Yes. Again, now we want to go on to some of the insights that some of these were offered by some of our colleagues, by some of the thought leaders, and I want to go into just to suggest some of the ones where we might want to start. We looked at the Camoin data as well too. So these are some of the insights and things we might want to consider. Go ahead, yep. And so one of them, when we looked at Keene's greatest housing issues, some of the themes, one of the themes was the housing needs and availability. And one thing that we could do, it seems like a no-brainer, is keep keep current on data, like every year. Now, we have this master plan on housing, which is 4 pages and so outdated that, on the housing side, like that our mayor was saying, we can put more granularity in some of that, or at least have that data on housing, on what the real situation is, just by looking at the data, particularly with seniors. Another one of the themes that was identified was the update the land use and zoning, and we've got a good start on that. However, we might need to publicize it to really get contractors and developers and other people in here to take advantage of these new CRDs and take advantage of the opportunities that we have had, and just to talk about so that Keene can be known as a place where it's nice to do business. It's easy to do business, is like Med has been pounding on me for 4 years as well too. We want everyone to know that, and we want to be able to walk that talk, and we have more tools now in order to do that. Another theme we've seen is the cost of housing utilities increasing faster than the cost of living. Took a swing at the electricity prices, and we are promoting more local production of solar and others, which is really, really good. But another thing that's been mentioned by several people is housing trusts. And how do we get them going? Involving the private sector and employees. We have some employers that around the state, hospital systems upstate, that are really taking a lead. We've heard some talk at Cheshire, and we're all waiting to see what can be developed here on the medical side. But there's some thinking that some employers can do it, and I think the idea between the housing trust is we can get smaller employers and others involved and invested in these private ventures, and it doesn't impact the tax rate of the Keene citizens and the Keene residents. Where to build and what type? There's a lot of cluster housing. We can show you an example of that as well too. And so I think we had one person here tonight mention, if you have everything together so you can build a cluster of homes at not just 3 or 4 houses, that's a neighborhood and that's a community. And that might be a place that some seniors or some other people who want to move out of their parents' basements or out of workforce or low-income housing could find an attractive neighborhood and place to be. And some of the other things many communities are dealing with, particularly ones up north, and we've seen that here too, and in Cheshire County, is the B&Bs and others are limiting supply and creating upward pressure on housing for others. And so some of the ideas that came up, explore city and county fees and controls in certain sectors. What we do, what can be done in order to regulate that enough so that we could have more of a fair ladder and progression. Is there anything more you want to say about that?
I'm not going to speak about that, but in the assessment again, land trust came up. And when I purchased my home back 25 years ago, I actually lived on a land trust in Keene. And it was a joint land trust with my neighbor. And so some of the information that people, I don't remember what counselor brought it up, but some of the information is correct. What happens is I lived on a land trust with a 99-year renewable lease. And so, but I was responsible for paying the property taxes. But if I ever sold my house could only be sold to someone that would qualify in the way of workforce housing. The only issue I had with that, which I'm sad to say, was with with the City of Keene Assessment Department when they brought someone in from out of state and did not understand how a land trust worked or the contract that went along with my house. So basically, my house was not allowed to be assessed at a particular rate, and I don't remember what it is, but if anyone's interested, I know who to contact if you're interested in having anyone speak to you about a land trust, and that would be Linda Mangones, because I was also on the board of Cheshire Housing Trust, and Cheshire Housing Trust actually liquidated all of the land trusts that they had. Like, I think it had to be 10 years ago or so, but the house I own now, I own the land because the land trust dissolved all the land trusts they were all in the City of Keene, as a matter of fact. And so once they did that, I was able to buy the property. So I do own my home, and I now own the land. And my neighbor and I have a very unusual lot because we actually share the land, but we lived side by side for so long now that it's worked out very, very well for us. So if anyone has any other interest about land trust, I'd be happy to talk to you and put you in contact with somebody if you're interested in it.
All right, I've got one more slide. Instead of ending with an assignment, which maybe that last page may be interpreted by some people in our town and council and board, wanted to show an example of what we meant by a cluster community. And these are houses that have a common area and that is upkept by someone else, and they can be very beautiful. And even perhaps designed with a water feature running through them, who knows? So want to leave you with this, and Pam and I were talking, and we're willing to take this presentation, even if you have some input for some changes, to other bodies to help promote and get more people interested in talking about housing.
We have one more slide, and I think this is very, very important. And I had mentioned it several times when I was chair of the planning board through the years, probably even as a city councilor. I'm just not going to go away with it. It's not going to go away from me until the city addresses it. And I highly, highly recommend that we update the master plan. The housing section only. It's old, it's outdated. It was last updated in 2007. It no longer applies for today. We need to track the annual data updates and keep it updated, because I think things are going to keep continuing to change, and we need to meet the current needs. And I'll let you respond.
Well, that's right. So, okay. So this may be something we can do. It's not something we can do unless we get an ad hoc committee, I think, appointed for this. But you got a picture, and you have an assignment of some things to look at as well too, particularly when you look at the Camoin needs of expanding housing capacity, improving the conditions and utility costs, promoting housing development, and supporting the stage of living transitions. If we believe what they told us was true and we like the methods, some of those should be written in as criteria in our master plan. That's why we think that we could lead a revision of the master plan and do the housing section if the council and the mayor and the planning board were amenable.
So we thank you for your attention. We hope this was helpful. If you would like us to take it to some other agencies, Raleigh and I are willing to do that, just not this month. For me, my grandchildren are here, and it's their third night here, and they're with Auntie B, but that's fine. If it was a babysitter, it would probably be a major crisis. My phone would be ringing off the wall. But it would be very helpful to us if we've missed something, or if you have a question about something. If this is something that you would like Raleigh and I to do, we would be happy to do that. And I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Okay.
Oh, that's okay. We
Bosley,
have some.
go ahead. Councilor Bosley, please, go ahead.
All right.
So first of all, I would like to say thank you to both of you. I know that this was really an intensive process. When the community development director and I talked about it originally. Raleigh stepped up for PLD, and I really appreciate that. I think that this group of people has done an incredible amount of work over the last couple of years with ADUs and CRDs and the commercial zones and 5 to 2 acres. And I feel like in the last couple of months, we took a little bit of a breath. And so you guys coming back at this moment is really nice, because I feel like it's giving me a little bit of energy into pushing again for some of the things that we know we need. What I heard is a parking revision, which I've said 100 times. And I'm waiting to see what we're going to come up with for that. And I think really easily, we as a city could get a tab on our website that has as a housing tools. And I think just listening to Pam speak about the knowledge that you have about these funds that are accessible to people, like that needs to be super easy for people in our community to get to. They should, if we can collate some of these opportunities, different, there are different discounts that can be received on utilities through Southwestern Community Services. There are housing opportunities that might become available, and there could be a place for housing, the Housing Authority to use that website to promote open availability. There could be funds available. There could be solar funds available. It doesn't have to just be for low income as well. I mean, there could be all sorts of places. If we can get them in one place and then just promote that, that's way easier than trying to promote a solar program and try to promote, awareness about weatherization funds. Let's promote this area where we always go, we know we can go to look for these tools. And I think that'll give us a little bit of ease as far as getting this information out. So yeah, now I'm excited to get back in the parking department and see if we can get some progress made there, and see what staff brings us next.
I think it would be very helpful to, I agree with you putting something on the city website, but I do want to tell you that the majority of the seniors that I've worked with over the last 15 years or so, many of them are not familiar with the computer. So I'm just going to go back to my idea about trying to present something like at the Keene Senior Center. Many, many times when our office has done an outreach, we go to the Senior Citizen Center. And if we tell them what it's going to be about, we usually get a very, very good audience. And so, I didn't ask you about that, so I'm sorry.
I can do it,
So.
if they'll let me in.
They'll let you. I'll tell them you're my friend, but you're younger. So, but anyway, I think if we want to reach seniors, that was one of the things that I came up with. But I didn't know if anyone else had any other questions.
Counselor Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me get my mic on here. Thank you to you both. Pam, I've known you so many years, and I know when you put your mind to something, it gets done. And Raleigh, you're in for it and working with her. I got to tell you that right now. But thank you both for your effort. Raleigh, you draw a beautiful flower. But if I may add one more petal to it, and it was something that I got from, I believe his name is Rob DePeel. He's the executive director of New Hampshire Housing. And he says what many of our communities need is attainable housing. That's people who are living in apartments right now. They have good credit. They have good jobs. They want to move out of that apartment and move into a house, and they can't find anything. And that was the term he used, attainable housing. And one other thing I do want to mention, I did have a discussion with the city attorney about what we can do about regulating Airbnb. What's the general term for that? Short-term rentals. Unfortunately, the way the state is run and with local control, there isn't anything we can do as a city council. It's got to be done at the state level. Right now, I think the only thing that affects it at the state level is the rooms and meals tax. Once someone stays over 185 days, the rooms and meals tax goes away, or something like that. So we need more control of that. If you look at the list of number of homes for sale in Keene, there aren't a lot. If you look at how many Airbnbs are advertised, there's a ton of them in Keene. So people are buying homes just to make money off of them, and that's part of the problem.
I'm not positive that the city attorney is correct about us not being able to do anything, and I'd be happy.
Well, I would welcome any.
Yeah. I
ordinances
don't
we
quite
can open
agree
up.
with that, but I'll find a way to look into it.
There are ways.
Well, I would appreciate that. And thank you again, both, for
Thank you.
this excellent
Thank you,
program.
Counselor Jones.
And I just wanted to add to what Counselor Jones is saying, and going back to the data, and I don't want to say that I've researched this in-depthly, but there is a lot of information coming out about Airbnbs right now, and about the reported earnings from Airbnb, and most of their major cities are reporting up to 50% losses in revenue. And there is an expectation that a lot of these Airbnbs that are being bought up will hopefully be being sold and being added back into the housing stock. And obviously, those are speculations and there's no guarantees. It is something that, if we can watch the trends, it would be interesting to kind of keep an eye on. And the other thing that as we were talking, that I was thinking, and I had written down a note, there has to be some way that the city could create some sort of tax incentive for buildings that are appropriate for seniors. And Pam, I'm never going to ask you to move. But what I can say is that I live next to seniors who are in multi-story homes. And my mother-in-law is an example, and I've brought her up before. She talks to me about that perfect 2-bedroom ranch that she wants as she gets older and she moves into her 80s. And I see my neighbors currently who are in their multi-story homes who would love 1-story living. And I'm not talking about nursing homes or 55-plus communities, but there are very few areas that were designed in this, because nothing is newly built. So that were designed in mind for handicap accessibility and for 1-story living. It's not the style of living in this community. So I don't know what we can do, but it's something to be creative about. And even if you need council to, come up with some sort of tax incentive for development that happens that suits a certain type of character, so that we can create opportunities for people to age in the community, that would be ideal.
2 things. I did read something this week that the Airbnb, I don't know if it's what it is, but I do know that it's in decline. I saw it, I just read it this week. So I don't know if that's going to change or shift. Yes, it'd be great if they decided to sell those homes and they went back on the market. That's number 1. Number 2, I do know, most of my friends are my age. They are senior citizens. Some of them are 10 years younger. But the bottom line for them is they also own a large enough property so that some of them are actually thinking to turn the house over to their adult children, and they will build a tiny home, or you can call it an accessory dwelling unit. I've been talking about this for 16 years. So I'm happy to see the ADU is finally passed. But anyway, it was before all of you were here. The bottom line is that is something I think that we could promote as well. Yes, if you want to stay, on your own property, and there are many seniors that are doing that, turning their home over to the adult children and then building a smaller unit on their own property. But I think that is something that we need to take to them so that they know that they can do this, because a lot of senior citizens don't understand that.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, does anyone,
Councilor Giacomo?
Thank you. So I don't know anything about real estate. I don't pretend to. But are there any programs out there, do you know of, and Pam, this is probably a good question for you, any like housing swap programs, things like that, where basically if there are people that are looking to downsize and people are looking to upsize, you can do a differential in value property swaps, things like that. It seems like a kind of wild program. I literally thought of it as you guys were just talking here, but is that something that actually exists anywhere in the world, and is there a mechanism by which that could happen?
In all the years I've been doing this, I've not heard of anything like that, but a really good one to ask would be, Mr. Orgaz, you're a real estate agent. Have you ever heard anything like that?
The only thing that might be similar to that would be assuming a mortgage where you would take over someone else's mortgage as they're nearing the end of it.
So you take each other's mortgage, sorry, we're
Yeah.
not talking through the chair, my apologies, but yeah.
But that's as close as I've heard to something similar.
Yeah, anyways, sorry, just wasn't sure if that was a thing that was actually a thing.
It's a good thought.
It does suggest that assumable mortgages would be something we should try to enable. I've got one, I don't know about you guys. I wouldn't do it any other way.
Any other questions?
Okay, yeah, I'd like to add my personal thanks for your informative presentation and for your drive in this particular area. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm sure
Mary,
we'll be
I
talking
really-
to you again.
Thank you. Mary, I just want to extend my thanks to you for putting me on this committee. But honestly, as much as I know, I have learned a lot more. And I'm always open to attending any conferences that they say, would you like to go to this? Oh, sure, I'll go. But I'm always learning, and I'm always open to suggestions because we're in such a major crisis. So thank you for all your time.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to serve this way.
Okay. So now to new business. Any items of new business that anyone would like to put forward? Seeing none.
Oh, Mr. Chair, sorry
Yes.
to
Oh,
interrupt.
I'm sorry.
One item, if the committee is interested, I have been in contact with JB Mack from Southwest Region Planning Commission about doing a potential presentation on the regional housing needs assessment. It sounds like he might be available for the September meeting date. If that's something that this committee would be interested in, I can tentatively schedule him on that agenda, assuming that we have other agenda items that night that would require a meeting to be held.
Well, I for one would be in favor of that. So I'll let Councillor Bosley speak for herself. Okay, thank you, Mary. So the next joint PB-PLD meeting is scheduled for Monday, August 14 at 6:30 in City Hall Council Chambers. So I will now adjourn this meeting at 8:17 PM. Thank you all.